The landscape of late-night, early-morning television can be a grim, desolate place. I can't tell you how many times I found myself awake at 4 a.m. watching an infomercial for something like boner vacuums or facial cleansers and asking myself, why am I watching this? Where did I go wrong in my life? I think television has become a lot more dull in recent years because everything is held under such tight reins by the sponsors. With everything being monitored like it is, people can't get away with things like they used to. Maybe that's a good thing. But if one has the spare time and is willing to wade through the crap, there is the occasional kernel of interest to be found. From my experiences, I usually come across these in the public access international and religious channels. The show I'm going to talk about now is of the third variety. It was a humble little show by the name of Faith Buddies. A show featuring interactions between children and puppets along with Bible stories and songs. Not terribly well made or ambitious, it was a little more than second-rate Sesame Street with Bible lessons thrown in. If you've ever seen things like Junior Christian Science Bible Lesson or Wiser Family Puppets, it's that sort of show with a similar unnerving feel to it. Much like Sesame Street, except it leaves you feeling mildly uncomfortable. But that's not to say it didn't have its own unique quality to it, boy did it ever. It stuck to its basic idea, and unlike JCSBL, it didn't invoke the feeling of everything on the show being the product of one crazy person. There had to be at least 3 different crazy people involved in the production of Faith Buddies. It was definitely a low-budget venture, constrained in both the monetary and creative sense. The thing about the show that caught my attention was the characters, and the unique tone that Faith Buddies had. I've heard it had the message itself is less important than the way in which it's conveyed. Faith Buddies seem to have this as one of its core principles. As such, its content was largely the same as other shows of its kind, but it lacked the typical softening to make it more palatable for young audiences. Bible stories were told by means of narration, combined with a slideshow of colored pencil images, which would sometimes display graphic imagery in accordance with the story, like Cain's murder of Abel. They didn't skimp on the blood like most do. People drowning in the story of Noah's Ark. The plagues of Egypt, especially this one. Trials of Job. Numerous appearances of Satan, not actually graphic, but noticeably darker and more serious than other depictions. They didn't censor the words either. If you kept a keen ear, you'd sometimes hear bastard or ass. Always in a biblical context, of course. But what catches your attention, though, I suppose in this current time where 7-year-olds play games like Resident Evil, none of this is all that shocking. So about the characters, there's the main character of sorts, Pinky. Oh god, Pinky, where do I start? Imagine Kermit without his neck frill, with a big lumpy head coloured pink. That's basically Pinky. Also notable was his eyes. His pupils were slightly too small and unfocused. Normally this wouldn't be important, except they liked to end the show by zooming in on Pinky's face. The character was referred to her as a he, but I could never tell if the voice actor was a man or a woman. Either way, they gave Pinky a bizarre voice, and it didn't help that he often would give his sentences in a painfully drawn-out delivery at random. Can only guess this was done to ensure that the dumb kids get it, as Pinky had a tone of bordering on condescending. Pinky was like the alpha puppet, and the show gravitated around him. Whenever one of the kids or the other puppets had a question, they would turn to Pinky for his insight. Though Pinky was typically shown with a Bible and would give verses most of the time, there would be other times he didn't mention the Bible at all and seemed to be giving answers on a whim. The first thing that caught my attention about the show was that Pinky's character had a distinct lack of warmth or empathy, which only got worse as the show continued. Pinky would give answers, but they would be very blunt and strangely defensive. Questions about hardships were swiftly answered with things like, "Be careful with questions like that," or "Don't question God's ways." Pinky was very fond of the latter, and would use it as a way of telling people to shut up. The other two puppets were Bertie and Gerta. There were others that would show up when needed, but these were the main three that were present for every episode. Bertie was a blue hippo, and Gerta was a green fuzzy bird. They were both little more than dim-witted idiots whose sole purpose was to be the foil for Pinky. They would get curious about something, come to faulty conclusions, and then the kids would take them to Pinky to set their dumb asses straight. Pinky would give them a weird, disjointed lecture, and they would then they would change their opinion. Pinky also didn't shy away from making cheap shots at them, all the kids. But they didn't dare to challenge him, except one time where Goethe called him a smarty pants. This was met not with only verbal response, but merely a cold, hateful glare. I wouldn't think a scene between two puppets not speaking would make me feel uneasy, but it did. Faith Buddies quickly became a guilty pleasure for me. As much of an arsehole Pinky was, I couldn't help but be amused by the guts this little puppet had. Pinky would tell it like it is, from his perspective, regardless of whether his words were appropriate or made any sense. And he just did not give a fuck whether he offended people or not. This was very evident in the homosexuality episode. Yes, I had an episode about gays, and this delicate subject was treated with all the subtlety of a hammer on glass. Sodom and Gomorrah, drawings of bearded men kissing. Leviticus 20:13. Dubious statistics regarding AIDS, the whole shebang. Pinky was so far to suggest that prison rape was a mass conspiracy conducted by Satan to turn men gay. It was funny up until the end, where this little girl was talking about Pinky about her older brother who had recently come out to his family. Pinky proceeded to scowl at her about how he was a sinner F-slur destined for hell. Leave the poor girl on the verge of tears. That was when I first started to really question what the intent behind the show was. It was always a little odd, but the latter episodes had become quite vile and mean-spirited. This would culminate in the show's last episode. along with everything else, even the way Faith Buddies started an episode was strange. It would feature Pinky asking questions like, "How do you feel about this?" before saying, "Today we're going to talk about," followed by a black title card showing a word like guilt or forgiveness in white font. The word for the last episode was predestination. And right from that moment, I had this feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. I had seen other kids' shows touch on other controversial topics such as homosexuality and sin, although briefly and with a lot more tact. But I had never, ever seen a children's show focus on or even mention predestination before. I must admit, I was really curious as to where they were going with this. I should have known better. The episode started the same way as any of the others. Bertie mentions an idea he heard called predestination, and talks about it with Goethe and some kids. A lot of goofiness and dicking around, with musical numbers and such. Then they go ask Pinky about it. Pinky reacted to this concept in an entirely too pleased manner, unlike anything seen before. A little boy asks him to clarify what it means, and he's told, "Some people are destined for heaven, and some are destined for hell," and rambles about the power of God. The boy asks, "Didn't Jesus die to save everyone?" And Pinky replies, "He died for the chosen ones." The other children gradually begin to grasp the gravity of this, become visibly afraid. The same boy asks him, "How do people know where they're predestined to go?" Pinky tells him, "You won't know for sure until you die. But if you look deep in your heart, you just might find the answer." Pinky then stares at the screen and everything comes to a halt. I thought the show was over until another title card comes up. "There's no redemption for the damned." Another slideshow of illustrations appears, but there's no Bible story or moral this time. Just a glimpse of what the viewer has in store for them if they're not chosen. A man and woman hugging each other before being burned. People with their feet chained to the ground, being eaten by marauding devils, whose mouth spans their entire body. Their bodies being ripped from their feet. People being impaled on spiked pillars by flying devils. People in a lake of fire having their bodies burned and regenerated forever. Giant deformed creatures fighting and gouging out each other's eyes. The accompanying music is spliced with the sounds of screaming and painful cries, with intermittent quips from Pinky such as, "This is the wrath of the Lord," and "It makes me happy to see sinners get what they deserve." This horror, thankfully, is cut short a few minutes in by yet another abrupt cut. This time the credits started rolling, but the scene is zoomed out to show the whole set, including lights, cameras, and microphones. The kids and puppets nowhere to be seen. A man in a black hood enters the room and proceeds to douse everything in gasoline before setting it aflame. The cameraman follows him out. The last scene shows the black hooded man, the cameraman, laughing as they toss all the puppets they used in the show into a furnace, with the final shot being a close-up of the burning Pinky puppet. It hasn't been that long since I've seen that episode, but I've yet to find any answers as to what this the intent of this show really was, or why it ended that way. I had some guesses that it might have been a covert parody all along, or perhaps the show's founders got their funding cut and this was their way of getting back. Or maybe they were just crazy. I really don't know. And that was Faith Buddies, written by CosbyDAF. Here's more 2 cents on the story. Oh my, that was intense. That was very intense, and oh my lord. Okay. So, where do I begin? Let's start with, the religious aspect found in creepypastas. I think that's something that needs to be explored a lot more in the realm of creepypastas. The Mandela Catalogue did it, although I don't know if the Mandela Catalogue would count as a creepypasta or not, but I digress. And they did the religious angle right, something that Sonic.exe did not do. Which, yes, I will read that sometime. Okay. The fact that Pinky gets worse and more blunt as the show progresses, that's not highly unrealistic. And, sometimes religious figures can get a little depraved. No offense to Christians, I am one myself, but the religious aspect, but yeah, the fact that some religious people can be depraved, that's what this story implements pretty well. The mystery of it all, whether they're getting back or because of the funding, or that it's a parody, or maybe they're crazy, yeah, that's what I want to know as well. The mystery of this is pretty good. I'll give it that. I have to say that this is actually a pretty solid story, through and through. Yes, granted there are some grammatical errors here and there, and I have corrected those, but overall, this story's not that bad. Honestly, I want this to be explored more. The religious aspect of creepypastas, I want this to be explored more in stories like this. Like this story, like the Mandela Catalogue, like Greylock. I think that Greylock has religious aspects, I'm not sure. But, yeah, I love this story. CosbyDAF, if you're watching this, I'm giving the story a 10 out of 10. I love this story a lot. With that being said, this is simply my own personal opinion. We all have our opinions regarding these stories. And if you disagree with it, that's perfectly fine too. Leave your thoughts on this story down in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye everybody!